Welcome back. This lesson is on Azure Virtual Network setup and configuration. Let's dive in. Azure Virtual Network serves as the foundation of your network infrastructure in Azure. It allows you to securely connect and isolate your resources. But how does it all work? Let me break it down for you. You need to see Azure Virtual Network as a virtual representation of your own network in the Azure cloud. It enables you to create private IP address spaces, define subnet, and control network traffic flow. Let's create our own virtual network together so you can have a better sense of what this is. I've logged into my Azure portal. From the left-hand menu, click on Create a Resource. And let's search for Virtual Network here. As you can see, we have Virtual Network in our search result. So I'm going to click on Create button here. As you should already be aware of by now, everything in Azure starts by having a valid subscription. So be sure to select a valid subscription that you have, and you select a resource group to house this virtual network. Or you can choose to create one if you wish. I already have one created, so I'm going to give that a click. Let's give our virtual network a name. How about we call this VNET 1? And you need to choose a region where you want your virtual network to be located. I'm good with the South African region here, although the rule of thumb is for you to choose a region that is closest to you. I'll click Next to move to the IP address section. From here, you will need to define, that is, the class of address that you wish to use and the subnet based on how many nodes that you're going to need the VNet to support. In this example, I'll just go with the default, which is a class A address with a VNSM mask of /16. Don't worry if this doesn't make a lot of sense to you right now. I'll try to make a separate video on IP addressing to explain things a little further. The next thing you'll need to do is to add a subnet. You can add one or more subnets within the address space by specifying their names and CIDR blocks. There's a default one here called default. How about we try to rename this as backend so we can use it to support our backend servers. I'll give it a click. I'll change the name to backend. I'm going to leave the subnet address range as they are with a VNSM mask of /24. This means that it can be used to support about 254 addresses. And keep in mind that some of these addresses are reserved by Azure. Let's click on Save and click Next to proceed to the security section. Here we can configure settings such as Bastion Host, DDoS protection, and firewall as per your requirements. I'll keep to the default and click Next. The next section here is for us to assign a tag. I'm not interested in tagging at this time, so I'm going to click on Review plus Create button. After validation is successful, let's click on Create. Selecting the right address space and subnet configuration is crucial in Azure networking. It lays the foundation for network connectivity, scalability, and security. By carefully designing your address space and subnet layouts, you can effectively manage IP address allocation, you can avoid conflicts, and optimize your resource utilization. Now that we have our Azure Virtual Network, let's talk about IP addressing and subnetting for a little bit, because this concept is crucial for designing and managing your network effectively. So, subnetting, what is it? Subnetting allows you to divide up your VNet into smaller and more manageable network segments to isolate resources and control network traffic. Let me show you how it's done real quick. I'm back to my Azure portal now. So from the left-hand menu, I'm going to click on Resource Group. Select the resource group that is housing your VNet. In this case, it is AZ-900. And from here, I'm going to select the virtual network where I want to create the subnet. In my case, it is VNET 1, so I'll give it a click. Under the settings section of the VNET blade, I'm going to click on subnets. As you can see here, we already have one subnet that we created earlier. If we wish to create an additional subnet, we'll do that by clicking on the subnet button. How about we call this front end nodes? Next, you need to specify a subnet and address range. Do keep in mind that the address range has to be within the parent virtual network's address space. In my example, the parent virtual network address space is using a VLSM mask of /16. So I have plenty of space to play with here. I'll stay with the default here. And for now, don't worry about NAT gateway, network security group, and the rest. So let's just focus on assigning it a subnet address range, which we've done already. And I'll click on save to save our changes. And there you have it. By creating multiple subnets within the Azure Virtual Network, you gain the flexibility to organize and segment your resources based on their functional requirements, security consideration, or specific networking needs that you might have. Now, with the subnet in place, we need to assign IP addresses to our resources. Let me show you how to assign an IP address to a virtual machine resource in Azure. A virtual machine in Azure is automatically assigned an IP address from a range that you specify. And this is based on the subnet in which the virtual machine is deployed. I'm back in my Azure portal now. I'm going to click on Resource Group. Select the resource group that is housing the virtual machine that you plan to assign an IP address to. And in this example, for me, it is Server 1 virtual machine. So I'll give it a click. Now, note not to make changes to your Azure Virtual Machine IP address from within the VM itself. If you do that, Azure Network will not be aware of that IP address, and it might make your virtual machine inaccessible if it is not done correctly. So moving on, from the VM blade, I'm going to click on Networking. And I'm going to select the network interface card for my VM. In this case, it is this one here. So I'll give it a click. And from the network interface blade, I'll click on IP configurations. So this is the IP configuration of my VM. I'll click on that. And from here, you can change the appropriate assignment method for your IP address. That is choosing between dynamic or static IP address assignments. With static, you're able to manually specify a specific IP address to be assigned to your VM. And if you choose dynamic, Azure automatically assigns an available IP address from the subnet address range to your VM. So go ahead and make all the necessary changes that you want. And remember to click on the Save button to save your changes. Proper IP address planning is critical to ensure seamless and efficient communication of your resources in Azure. Neglecting to plan can lead to IP address conflict and can cause serious disruption of your network. So the way to avoid this conflict is by taking the time to plan your IP addresses properly. And there you have it. In this lesson, we have covered Azure Virtual Network and how to assign an IP address to a VM in Azure. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye for now.